It's nice to see you again. Many faces who have been here and recently for the number of events that we've had. My name is Duncan Wood. I'm director of the Mexico Institute. We are delighted to be able to host this book launch today for Guillermo Valdez Castellanos, who has written the book The History of Drug Trafficking in Mexico, Historia del Narcotráfico en México. This is an extraordinary time, of course, to be talking about these things. I did get a note yesterday from somebody saying, you know, how did you manage to work that out just in time for the book launch? And I say, you know, we have ways and means. We English people are very tricky. We're also delighted to have John Bailey with us, you know, a very, very good friend of the Mexico Institute who helps us out in innumerable ways. John, of course, is a great expert in the question of organized crime, not just in Mexico, but across Latin America. And in fact, one of the first pieces that I ever read on organized crime was written by John, looking at the comparison between organized crime structures in Mexico and in Brazil. John will be giving a little bit of commentary and giving some questions after the presentation by Guillermo. And I hope that we have active participation from you guys. I know it's cold outside, but you're in here, you've had coffee, so get your questions ready. This should be an interactive experience as much as possible. Guillermo, let me just say, it's a great, great pleasure to have you here. It really is. Thank you so much for making the journey up. Thank you for braving our, our polar vortex temperatures. And, I hope that we're going to have a very vibrant and dynamic discussion here today. I'm not going to read out biographies or anything like that. I think it's just better if we kick off straight away with the discussion. So I'll pass things over to John. Thank you.
Thanks very much. For me, it's a real pleasure to be here with Guillermo Valdez. We've had 3 or 4 good conversations. I've learned an enormous amount from Guillermo. I want to endorse his book. This is really a good book in the sense that it synthesizes a lot of literature, and it does a very useful narrative of the history of, it's called History of Narco-Trafficking. It does a very good narrative of the history, but it's a very good style, because in the narrative there are like apartados, where there is this kind of middle range analytics. And it's one of the best discussions I've seen of the nature of trafficking organizations. If you're a student of organization theory, for example, it gets into the nature of the organizations and their environment, and it captures the dynamic. This is a rapidly changing set of issues, and I think the book does a wonderful job in all of those ways. It's a good history, it's a good analytic discussion, and it has a good sense of the dynamics. And I'm pleased to say the book is doing well, and so I'm glad about that. You can read about Guillermo's background in the paper. He is a former director of CISEN, and maybe it's useful to say a couple words about CISEN, and you should correct me if I get this wrong, any or all of it. But CISEN is the leading strategic intelligence agency. That its job is to try to look down the road X number of years and months and try to make sense out of the kinds of threats and opportunities that loom, and then to try to translate that into policy that makes sense to the rest of the government. So it's a very critical agency. Over the years, I think it has evolved into probably the leading intelligence agency in the region. It plays an important role as a kind of interlocutor, or at least it did. I don't know about this administration. An interlocutor between the U.S. and other governments. It's the sort of outward-looking agency in trying to coordinate activities and flows of information between other governments and the Mexican government. So it's quite an important agency. And Guillermo was the head of the agency during the Felipe Calderon administration. So he brings a lot of experience to this. And this book was written when he was on a sabbatical, I gather,
yes,
a year in Spain. So I congratulate you. Good discipline and good productivity. And it took me 20 years to write a book, 1/3 as long. Guillermo does this in a year. So congratulations, Guillermo.
Thank
Delighted
you.
to see you. I'm looking forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first I want to thank Woodrow Wilson Center, Duncan, the invitation they made me to come to present this book. It's an honor to me to be here really. Second, I want to ask you for patience because my English is not very good. So I will talk slow to make it clear. And I prepared just 3 small pages trying to explain how did I write this book and which are the main conclusions. But first, to understand the conclusions, I need to say what was the real objective of this book. When you know, I was 5 years in this immersed in this war against organized crime, and all the time we used to read and see what was the political analysis and the debate was saying about this fight against organized crime, and you see there was a big distance between what has been saying the people and what was really happening. So when I left CISEN, I said I want to write the book because we need to tell the story. We need to give an explanation of what is happening. And the main thing we need to explain is why so much violence. And so I decided to write a contribution on this issue. Why so much violence in Mexico in 2006, 2012? And I wanted a different approach to the problem of the violence. What we have read in those years is narcotraffic is non-violent in most of the countries where they operate. And in Mexico, drug trafficking organization has not been so violent in the previous years. So if now they are so violent, what is the explanation of this change? Is the only thing that has changed is the policy of the government, the decision of President Calderon to attack the organization. So the main cause of the violence is the policy of the government. So I think this was a very easy and simplistic explanation. So we need to contribute and have a different approach to this very common explanation that was given in the media during President Calderon's presidency. So this different approximation was in 2 senses. First, we need to look and take care of the organized crime organizations. If to put the emphasis and the study in the criminal organizations, not only in the government policies. And second, we need to understand, we don't need to make a political speech. I think that the debate was very politicized. So I thought that we need to explain, not to make a political speech to blame Calderon or the PRI or the PAN or whatever. If we want to understand and solve the problem, we don't need to introduce political point of view. So that's why, and I write it in the introduction of my book, this is never wanted to be the official version of President Calderon's point of view. Mm-hmm. So this is a small contribution to the problem of violence from these 2 different approaches, focused on organized crime and away from the partisan points of view. Well, I had several hypotheses to work this book, because when I said I want to make an explanation of violence, I never thought that I would write a history of narco trafficking. That's different. So, because I'm not historian, the only relationship with the drugs is maybe I smoked 2 times marijuana during college, and it was very strange. If someone had told me that I was going to write a book on history of narco trafficking, what kind of pot did you smoke? But let me tell you the story how it evolved from the violence explanation to the history of narco trafficking. These are the hypotheses. The violence cannot be explained merely as a result of the government's strategy against organizations dedicated to drug trafficking. So, second, the violence is caused first and foremost, and in the first instance, by those who practice the violence. It's obvious, it's like the black, how do you say, Lilo Negro. Yeah. But if we say that considering that at least 85% of the murders have been committed by drug trafficking organizations, and the violence has been qualitatively and quantitatively different from that which preceded it, we must answer 2 questions. How and why did the organizations dedicated to drug trafficking created such well-equipped private armies? So if 80% of the crimes of the homicides were committed by these guys, how did Mexico have so many people armed in the streets fighting? So why the organizations of drug trafficking created these private armies? That's a question that had to be answered. This is let me say, this is a necessary condition of the violence. Not sufficient, but necessary. Why, in the middle of in the first decade of this century, the drug trafficking organizations decided that they needed these armies with very sophisticated equipment, and the second question, why in 2008 they decided to explode, to commit this huge violence, which economical, social, political causes made them go into war between them. I think, why so many armies, and why in 2008 they began to fight in that way? I think those were the main questions. In order to explain the violence of these recent years and answer those 2 questions, we have just paused to reconstruct the history. We cannot understand, for example, the Zetas, or the conflict between Beltrán Leiva and Chapo and Juárez, and without making the history of how these organizations become so violent. You know, so these questions of how to make a history of the organizations, because not all crime organizations are so violent like in Mexico. So we needed to explain the specific characteristics in these organizations and what factors made them to evolve in that way. So I needed to make a history. So that posed me new methodological problems. How to construct such a history. So I began to read a lot of articles on the theory of organized crime, and I discovered three main approaches, three approximations that were fundamental to construct the history of the organized crime in Mexico. First, it's obvious, but nobody has done in Mexico, organized crime are enterprises, are firms dedicated to an illegal business. So we need to understand how these enterprises, these firms, work, or how do they function. So, second, how does illegal markets operate? They are illegal enterprises, and they work without illegal markets. So we need to understand the way the illegal markets. And one thing is very important in this issue, I will not talk a lot of things, but just to say that in the legal market there is a tension always between a trend to construct and to build monopolies and the competition between several organizations. And this is a very important thing to understand how the organized crime dedicated to narco trafficking in Mexico operate. And third, I needed to understand that organized crime organizations work with two characteristics. If you want to define organized crime, Mexico or wherever, you need to understand that they are organizations that operate outside the state. That means that if they have economic conflicts between them, they cannot go to the judiciary system to solve the conflicts, the problems. So they operate outside the state institutions. And second, the state is always working and operating against them. So they need to organize in some ways that they will not be caught, that they will not be detained by the security institution. So these two characteristics, they operate outside the state and with the state against them. So these three approximations, they are enterprises, firms, they work within the laws and the way they operate the illegal markets, and they are working outside the state and with the state against them. So that, I need to make the history of how these organizations are structured within them, how do they work, how do they deal with the fact that they are outside the state and with the state against them. And from this, I assumed those 2 points of view, and then I decided that I defined the hypothesis, the research hypothesis in a very classic way. I had the dependent variable was the kind of organizations, and the independent variables. The dependent variable is how are these these organizations, how are they structured, how do they establish relationship between them, which characteristics, what kind of organizations they have, for example, how many logistic parts are the Sicarius part, the intelligence units, a lot of how they are organized. And that kind of organizations and that specific characteristics of this organization was to be explained by 4 factors, the independent variables. First, the demand, the economic demand. You cannot explain the size and the complexity of the organization if you don't understand the demand they try to satisfy. Let me put an example. When in the 30s or the 40s, maybe the Mexican organization exported, I don't know, maybe 100 tons of marijuana a year. When the boom of marijuana in the United States in the 60s, every year around 3 million new Americans began to smoke marijuana. So the amount of marijuana to produce and export to the United States should be about 10 tons a day. So the kind of productive organizations you need to construct in Mexico to produce, pack, transport, and export 10 tons of marijuana each day, it's very different from if you need to export 10 tons a year. So if you don't study the demand and how that demand impacts in the organization of the organized crime, you don't understand nothing. So that's the first factor. I need to construct the story of the organizations parallel to the story of the demand mainly in the United States. Second factor to explain how evolved the organized crime is the U.S. drug policy. If you don't have how the United States government how does this the U.S. drug policy is a factor that affects not only demand but also the characteristics and business strategies of these organizations, not only in the United States but outside. Let me put the example of extradition in how that affected the Colombian cartels, and that policy of the United States provoked that the Colombian cartels to let the cocaine market to the Mexican organizations. So the impact of that specific policy was very important to the organizations in Mexico. Third, the Mexican state's complex, multiple, and schizophrenic relationship with the drug trafficking, which has evolved throughout almost a century of prohibition. The third factor is this very complex relationship between the Mexican state and the drug trafficking. Because if, remember that I told you that one of the main characteristics of the organized crime organization is that they operate with the state against them. In the classic theory, when the state works against the organized crime remains small networks of small firms and enterprises. But in Mexico, the reality is that the state has not operated against them. So the size and the power of this organization is very big because the state has not, and the relationship between the state and the drug trafficking organization is very complex and has evolved. And you can find the 3 different stages but that's the next point. So, and the fourth factor that explains the way and the characteristics of the crime organizations is the very complex relationship of this organization with society. How do they make these ties with society? The narco-trafficking has a social basement. The peasants that produce marijuana and amapola, the people who consumes in the cities, the network of distribution in the cities. It's a very complex relationship with the society. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to study this last and fourth relationship between drugs, organized crime, and society. So I focus on the first 3 factors: the market behavior, the demand, the U.S. drug policy, and the relationship between organized crime and the state. So what are some findings of this study? First, the drug trafficking industry has gone through 3 stages. One, the traffickers' emergence as a dispersed local businesses that were neither vertically nor horizontally integrated. These are the first years from 1926 to 1950. From their inception, these enterprises were closely linked to and controlled by local political power. We have some kind of local state enterprises. Each governor had its own. In the north states of the country, we had the Sinaloa drug trafficking organizations ruled and owned by the governor. And in Baja California, we had another, and in Chihuahua, we had another. So, but they were different, and they compete, and they were small, and the federal government has no power to control them because it was the 30s, the 40s, the federal government was threatening, had another agenda and another priority, so they didn't care about the drug trafficking and this is the first stage. Second, there was an integration of these local dispersed enterprises into one big monopolistic corporations. But these monopoly, these big corporations, this big corporation of drug trafficking in Sinaloa was controlled by the Sinaloa people. Within was a network of family and regional units who participated in the different parts of the business. Some produce and plant the amapola, others transport them, etc. And this, in this stage, they operated under a unified command and enjoyed the tolerance and collaboration of federal authorities. So, you know, in Mexico, the way the government and the political system worked in the second half of the century, mainly between 1940 and 1980, the government was, the political system was structured with the political party with 3 sectors, a corporation of workers, a corporation of peasants, and a corporation of popular organizations. So I say that this was the 4th sector of the political system, the corporation of drug trafficking, because it was the same model. So if to control the workers, the unions, we have the Department of Labor. The Department of Drug Trafficking was the Dirección Federal de Seguridad. So that's the way, and it was a tacit agreement between state and these drug trafficking organizations, and it was there was a lot of big tolerance, and they used to help, not only tolerate them, but they used to help them. So this is the second stage. It was a period of flourishing the drug trafficking, because it was the time between 1950 and 1980 when the demand for marijuana in the United States and amapola grew well, and the third process is this corporation disappears because of the pressure of the United States, and when the killing of Agent Kiki Camarena, so the government needs is forced to decapitate the corporation. All the leaders are sent to jail. Caro Quintero, Fonseca, Ernesto Fonseca, and Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. So the corporation is decapitated, and the administration consulting, let's say, the how do you say, el consejo?
Council? Board?
El board que es la Federal de Seguridad, disappears. So the relationship, the pact, this tacit agreement explodes, so disappears, and so the corporations is transforms to 6 regional or national cartels. And it's when, in the late 80s, 1989, when Tijuana cartel, Juarez cartel, Sinaloa cartel born. So we have this fragmentation of the industry. And with these fragmentations began also the conflicts between them to reconstruct the monopolistic characteristic of this market. So we have since 1990 to 2006 to 2011, or 3 kind of conflicts between this new situation of the drug trafficking industry. We have a fragmented industry with different organizations fighting between them. And we have 3 kind of conflicts between them. The fight for control over the drug trafficking industry. The logic that appears to have underpinned the main conflicts that began in the 1990s and the first years of the current century point toward a monopolistic reconstruction. If you see the logic of the conflicts, you have in this year from 1990 to 2012 or 13 or 14, you have the disappearance of several regional cartels. There is no more Tijuana cartel. There is no more Colima cartel. And mainly the Juarez cartel is vanished mainly. Second, you have another cartel, regional cartel, Milenio, which operated in Michoacán, that was destroyed by the Zetas when they arrived in Michoacán, so they disappeared. This another example of this fight to reconstruct the monopolistic structure is the battle between the 2 largest organizations, Golfo and Sinaloa. So this is the first time of conflicts that which logic is to reconstruct this monopolistic characteristic. Second type of conflicts arose out of wars for control over the main organizations. Okay, we have those main organizations, Sinaloa and Golfo. And you can see that those main organizations are controlling and making disappear all the regional cartels. And we have another kind of conflict, is the conflict within these national cartels. We had a very violent conflict between within the Sinaloa cartel, that was the war between Chapo and Beltrán Leiva. And in 2010, we have the conflict between Golfos and Zetas when they separate. So we have this another kind of conflict within the main organizations. And we have, third, the battle between the 2 largest organizations, Golfo and Sinaloa. So we have 3 kind of conflicts that very clearly signs that the logic of all this is who is going to be the dominating enterprise. Second type of conflicts arose at the second finding. Conflicts between organizations have been fundamental and obvious factor in the increasing militarizations of Mexican drug trafficking organizations. It's obvious. If they are fighting to control the industry, they will need to have a lot of guns, a lot of people fighting. So, and well, I think that you have read a lot of things that have been written on this issue. Alejandro Hope's article in several months ago that saying the perfect storm, this factor of the conflicts, the end of the ban of in 2004 of the ban to sell assaulting weapons, etc. Third finding, so the conflicts provoke that the organizations construct their private armies. And another specific characteristic of the organized crime organization is that they diversified. They began not only to export drugs to the United States, but also to make extortions and kidnappings, and that was because of the Zetas, who was the military arm of the Golfo, and they needed to have more income. They were just, the Zetas in the beginning just were people who was paid a salary. So they say, okay, they said to the Gulf cartel leaders, your power is based on us in our work, so we need more money. So they began to have a lot of extra business, and they decided to increase the local markets of drugs and the kidnappings and the extortion. So the Zetas provoked both militarizations and diversifying the actions of the organized crime. And the historical reconstruction of drug trafficking, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, confirmed rather than uncovered a truth so obvious that its full implications had been underestimated. The quantitative and qualitative dimensions of organized crime in Mexico cannot be explained without the complicity and collaboration of security and criminal justice institutions. This size and strength and power of the crime organizations is one face of the coin, and the other is the weakness of the institutions, the public institutions. The criminal organizations operate outside the state, which has failed to move against them in a serious, unified, and systematic manner, and omissions that explains the enormous criminal density in Mexico, its expansion throughout the country, and its dimension as a transnational enterprises. This weakness and omission by the state in relation to organized crime is the other side of the coin of violence. So I think that's enough to begin the discussion, I think.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks. We usually do a round of questions, and so we take two or three at a time, and you can organize them and respond in the way that you think is most useful. And as moderator, I get to ask the first question.
Okay.
That's the main value added here. The book addresses the main debate in Mexico now, which is about violence. And it tries to make its arguments, and it tries to join that debate, and I think it makes a very valuable contribution. One of the themes that you touch on in the book that I want to go back to is the other side of the coin, which is the penetration and corruption of state and local governments especially, but in some ways at the national level as well. That the violence is the debate now, and I suspect the debate in the next 10 years is going to be about penetration and control of state and local governments by criminal groups. And you use this term, I can't, maybe I'm getting it wrong, captura reconfigurada del Estado, or the reconfigured capture of the state, which comes from Colombians. So I'm curious to hear how you look at this problem and how you see it evolving over the next 3 or 4 years, and how this will get on the agenda, and how the Mexican government and civil society will respond to that. So that's my question. And let me open it up and ask, identify yourself, please, and your affiliation, and make your question pretty succinct. And then we can do a round of 2 or 3 and then come back. The gentleman, please, on the aisle there.
Hi, thank you. My name's Joshua. I'm with the U.S. Department of Treasury Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and I just wanted to ask if you have a specific cultural factor that motivates individuals to participate in the drug trafficking organizations that you think government would be most successful in augmenting, whether it's poverty or education or a subculture type of thing. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me look around. This gentleman, please, here on the side, and then I'll go over.
Thank you, Ruben Barrera with the Mexican News Agency, not MEX. Mr. Valdez, thank you for the presentation. And I have one question, and I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you wrote a piece a couple of days ago about El Chapo, referring to these claims by Mexicans that now the government needs to go against those people who covered El Chapo and helping to elude authorities for more than a decade. And the question basically is, what do you make of this decision by Mexican authorities not to extradite El Chapo to the U.S., going against previous policy of President Calderon, where these guys were extradited the next day to the United States? And the question is, if you feel that in some way what the Mexican government is trying to prove with this decision to keep El Chapo in Mexico is that this time they're going to be serious in keeping him for the long time in prison, especially because there have been some suggestion by members of Congress that he needs to be extradited in order to avoid another possibility to escape.
Can we take one more?
Yes.
One more, is that good? Boris, you had your hand. Please give your name and give your affiliation, and we can close this round.
Hi, Juan Belico, World Bank Citizen Security Team. My question is, what are the relations of those narco-trafficking groups with other informal markets or illicit markets?
Yeah, good. We can close here and then
Yes.
deal with this. Good.
Well, I think that what your point, John, is I think it's the key issue, and that's I think that this penetration of the organized crime in the local political institution is the main reason make Calderon's government to react against them.
Okay.
Because, as government, you can have a lot of problems with the security. A lot of people angry because there are a lot of extortions and kidnappings and the car thefts or whatever. But that's not a real threat to the main governability. But when you see that the organized crime is controlling the political institutions, that's another thing. Mm-hmm. So that what's happening in Michoacán and Tamaulipas and in the early 2000s. So that's why the way the Calderon government responded to this issue is that was the agreement, the national agreement on justice and security that was signed was signed in August 2008. But the problem with this issue is that not all in Mexico not all in the political class in Mexico believes that kind or think this is a big problem. Mm-hmm. So we will not move as fast as we need if the political class is not convinced that this is a big problem. Mm-hmm. So I think we have moved in that direction, and now a lot of people think that's a real challenge to the state. But I don't see still that this is a priority.
Okay.
I think that for example, what is happening now in Michoacán, you have an expressions, this autodefensive movement is just an expression of this weakness of the state, and the risk is not only the disappearance of a state, but the next stage, that is civil war. Two civil groups armed, fighting between them, Templarios and Autodefensas. So I hope that after Michoacán, all this strategy to threaten the local institutions and to make a national effort in transparency and will be, and after will be more important for not only for the government but for the state in general, because the legislative has a lot of work to do in that issue, and the judicial system also, but also the federal government needs to push, to press the local governments, because I think that the process of threatening the local police forces is slowed down.
Okay.
So I think this will be the issue. If we want to solve, for example, Michoacán, maybe this federal operative can tranquilize things for a moment, for several months, maybe to the next election in 2015, but after that, what if you do not reconstruct the local institutions? So, second, well, the social economic factors that provoked that a lot of people get involved with this. We don't have a really good studies or a systematic research to study this kind of things. I don't think that that there is a direct relationship between poverty and lack of educations and participating in drug trafficking organizations. Obviously, there's a lot of poor peasants, farmers who need to produce and to have some money, so they participate with the drug traffickers. But for example, if you see the level of human development of the 18 municipalities of Sinaloa, Badiraguato, which is the main origin of the drug trafficking, is the only very extreme poverty municipality in Sinaloa. The municipality that has been producing drugs for a century is the poorest. So it's a contradiction. You could think that the peasants in Badiraguato are very rich, because they have been producing marijuana and amapola for a century. So they're the most poor peasants in Sinaloa. And you can also see polls in Culiacan when you ask the young people who goes to university to and they are asked what they want to be after they finish their studies. Most of them answered, "I want to be narco junior." So, and they are educated. So you have, I think it's maybe it's a aspirational thing. I don't know. It's very complex, and I haven't seen a real effort in Mexico to make a systematic research on this issue. So it's, I don't know really. about the reasons for the Mexican government not to extradite Chapo. Well, I think that it's a kind of national pride issue. It's very embarrassing for the Mexican government and for the Mexican state and for all the Mexicans that the way the Chapo escaped from prison in 2001. So we need to do something about that, and we need to trust our judiciary and the penitentiary system. So I think we need we have the challenge to demonstrate the whole world that we can have the Chapo in jail and that he will not escape. I think it's a political, you cannot avoid that, it's obvious. So I think that's the main reason. And the relationship with illegal markets or informal markets. Well, that's I just have some flash points because that's the part of the book I didn't study. So, because believe me that when I asked President Calderon 1 year, a sabbatic year, and I said I'm going to rest after 5 years of being at CISEN, and well, because I think I will get bored if I don't write that book, so I decided to write the book. And I began to read and read and read and make notes, and finally in 2012 August, I began to write the book. And I was going back to Mexico in December, and the first day I sat at 9 a.m., at 11 in the night, 14 hours later, I have written just 2 pages. I said, I will never. Yeah. So, so I have to take up. Also, I couldn't do that part of the research. So, but I think that the border between informal markets and criminal activities is disappearing. And you have several, I think in all the major cities you have, for example, Tepito in Mexico City. That's the core of the informal markets. It's the center of distribution of illegal and informal markets, liquors, music, films, and in Tepito where all the local gangs, all local organized crime, and let's say federal organized crime melted together. So in Guadalajara you have another area of the informal markets, and the connection between the informal markets, these networks of people selling things in the streets, and the crime organizations that make possible to bring this quantity of things that they sell on the streets. That's a very complicated issue, and I think that I think that the government in Mexico is not putting attention to this issue. No? In Michoacán, for example, the La Familia and now Los Templarios, they have production of illegal tequila, and the brand is Templarios, and you had a lot of these illegal CDs, brand La Familia. They put the brand in the CDs, so the relationship is growing, but we have not. The government is not putting attention to this issue.
Let's open a second round, and again, I get to, as moderator, ask the first question, which is, with the capture of Joaquin Guzman, Chapo Guzman, it presents this really interesting problem because the Sinaloa group and other groups operated, the Sinaloa group operated for 13 years, Chapo operated for 13 years, bribing lots and lots of people in government and in the security forces and so forth. So I help us understand, you've got this person, and this person is going to tell the government something or a lot. What does a sitting president do when the report comes in and the person captured has told you a lot and you have a list of names? Well, that's an exquisite problem.
Yes.
And I'm very curious about how to think about this problem, because it's a political decision in many cases. If there are sensitive names or sitting office holders or that sort of thing, it's a very difficult call for the government to decide how to proceed. But one would expect something will come of the capture and the transfer of information to the government authorities. And so help us understand what kind of reasoning and calculations have to go on by a government using that kind of information. So with that, let's open another round. Against the wall, please, and then I go to this young lady here, and there's a young lady here, please.
George Grayson, College of William and Mary, and I want to congratulate Don Guillermo on a magnum opus that he has written. Also, John Bailey has just published a book on Mexico and the crime issue. But my question deals with Felix Gallardo, and you touch upon this in your book, Don Guillermo, and that is, when was the allocation of the plazas made? Was it made by Felix Gallardo from behind bars? Was it made before he was arrested? Was he there? Was it El Azul who did it? I know you addressed this, but there are several theories, and I wonder what your view of this is now.
Good.
Okay.
There was this young woman here. Thank you. Your name and affiliation.
Yes. Hi, Lee Northrop. I'm with the Bank of Tokyo.
Excuse me?
You mentioned.
I couldn't hear.
Sorry, Lee Northrop.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the independent variables as the U.S. drug policy and U.S. demand. So I'm wondering, with the recent trend towards legalization, if this continues in the United States of marijuana specifically, could this have a good effect by decreasing the demand for these illegal drugs, or are we likely to see increasing competition, increased violence, diversification into other drugs, methamphetamines, opiates, even tequila, like you mentioned, or could they possibly look to diversify into other markets, either internally or abroad?
Okay.
Thank you.
Young woman there, please.
Hi, Tara McGovern from George Mason University. I'm writing my dissertation on criminal gangs in Colombia. And so I wanted to ask sort of the opposite end of her question, the ongoing peace process with the FARC and sort of the fracturing of the criminal gangs in Colombia. Do you see that affecting the supply of cocaine and other drugs to Mexico? And what impact might that have on the drug trafficking organizations there?
Okay.
Let's close this round, and you can deal with these.
Okay.
And then we'll come back up to you. Good.
Okay. Well, how to deal with the Chapo and all the information he has? Well, this was written for my Millennial article today about this issue because we know that narco-trafficking would not exist if didn't have this kind of political and policiac protection. It's obvious. Having said that, the problem is that from this truth, it's real that they bribe police. and not only police, local police, but people from the governments and in higher levels. The problem is how to prove that. For example, a lot of times when we cut the accountants of local kingpin, they had in the laptop, in an Excel page, all the list of the local police. We call it narconominas. And we have the name of each of the policemen who were bribed and said, Juan Lopez, 2,000 pesos, and Luis Gomez, 5,000 pesos, and Commander, whatever, 10,000 or 20,000 pesos. But from that evidence in electronic file to prove in front of a judge that he received that amount of money, we have. So, although you have the file, the name, the amount, you don't have the record of the bank because always it's cash.
Yeah.
How do you prove that? Okay, yeah, that's my name, and that's it. That they maybe used to give me money, but prove it to me.
Yeah.
So that's the problem is translating this information from the common sense to the legal truth with judiciary value. So that's the main problem we have this. So maybe the Chapo, and Chapo can play a very interesting game, saying, well, I can say that this guy and this guy and this guy was bribed by me, so he can destroy, he has a lot of power. So the problem is, okay, tell what you know, but give me proof. That's the main. So I don't think, I think that Chapo has a lot of time to think what will be the next steps.
Strategy.
Yes, strategy, because he's a very clever man. So I really don't know, but I think that the government is a big problem because a lot of people has said and written that if they would not believe in the will of those government to fight organized crime, if they don't see the politicians who protected the Chapo in jail also. So it has a big problem. And the other problem is it would be easy if you send Chapo to the United States.
That's right.
And you don't have this problem, but also I think that is another question, another issue here is that if you send Chapo to extradite him, you give Americans a lot of power.
Yeah, information.
So I think that's another important reason
Yeah.
to keep this information. So, but I don't know, it's a two, how do you say, arma de dos filos? Double-edged weapon, yes. So I don't know which, but what Enrique Peña's government will do, but they will have to give the people someone from political side will necessarily go to jail.
Okay.
I don't know who and when and with which proofs, but
As Humphrey Bogart said, somebody's got to take the fall.
yeah, yes. Okay, and about this assignment of cartels during after the Felix Gallardo detention. Well, I read. What I say in the book is that there are a lot of versions about this meeting in Acapulco when Felix Gallardo is detained in April of 1989, and the corporation is going to split, and Felix Gallardo said, "Let's organize a a meeting with all the chiefs and to organize a distribution. And I think that are two parts of the distribution. One is how the Sinaloa families distribute there were three groups. The Sinaloa members of the organization, the police commanders who were in the business, and we had another new group, the Golfo Cartel, that they did not exist, and they were not, and so I don't know who finally made the decision, but I think it was a complex process of negotiations between the Sinaloa families, Felix Gallardo, Güero Palma, Chapo, Zambada, etc., and the members of the La Dirección Federal de Seguridad, because in the first repartition, we have members of the Dirección Federal de Seguridad. They kept two big plazas, Juárez and Mexicali and Sonora. I don't remember, San Luis Rio Colorado. No, in Mexicali there were two members of the La Dirección Federal de Seguridad. And Aguilar Guajardo was member of the Dirección Federal de Seguridad, and he was the first Cartel of Juárez chief. And you also had not the members of the Dirección Federal de Seguridad, but the members of the Policía Judicial Federal. Guillermo González Calderoni and I don't remember the names of the others, but those who were part of the Golfo Cartel. Aguilar Garza. Yeah. So we have these three groups. So I think that we will never know the details, which one, but I think the main, I have no doubt that was a process of negotiation between these three groups. The drug kingpins, the Sinaloa, the members of the Federal Seguridad, and the new members of the Policía Judicial Federal, who were going to become what used to make the members of the Federal de Seguridad. And I think that what I say in the book, that it's a surprise that the members of the Sinaloa families did not control Tamaulipas. Mm-hmm. The normal would be that if they were the only ones who practiced the drug trafficking in this part of the country, why they didn't keep Tamaulipas? Mm-hmm. And Tamaulipas appeared a new drug kingpin, Garcia Abrego, and behind them was González Calderoni, obviously, and the members of the Judicial Federal. So that thing says that the Judicial Federal wanted a special crime, drug trafficking organization for them.
And the president's brother was also quite close to.
That's a lot of rumors about that, you know, and I write down in the footnote.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
legalization?
Legalizations, yes. I think that the legalization of marijuana is maybe in 10 years will be widespread, and I hope that not only United States but in UN, United Nations, because the problem is if the United Nations doesn't change the legal markets, the governance of the countries will be in a contradiction between what they have signed with the United Nations and what is happening in reality. So I think that when the legalization of marijuana arrives, the Mexican, this very dynamic markets, but in 2010, 2011, the Mexican drug trafficking organizations earned about 30% of the total income because of marijuana exports. So we could expect that they lose 30% of their income. And the 70% is due to cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. So they would be a little less powerful, but they would not disappear. And we don't know if how they will deal with this. I don't know if they will try to sell more cocaine or to open new markets outside the United States with cocaine or methamphetamine. I don't know, but I think that I think that Chapo has, in Mexico, I think Mexican marijuana began to lose competitiveness with the local marijuana. And for example, in 2011, the army destroyed about 50 hectares. It's a long field of marijuana, very productive, very sophisticated. So, and in another army in Aguascalientes, they destroyed not a big field, but a small, how do you say, invernadero?
Greenhouse, is that
Greenhouse.
the best? Yeah.
Yes. With all the technological improvements. So I think that they are moving ahead. And I would not be surprised if Chapo is trying, or some Mexican organizations, to participate in Washington and Colorado free legal marijuana business. So, well, the point is only 30% of the income comes from marijuana export. So it's not, they will not disappear, and they have ways to compensate that. And I don't think that the hard drugs will be legalized, so we will have drug trafficking for a while. No? We don't have specific studies on the impact of on violence. We think that it will not have the reasons why the local organizations fight doesn't go through marijuana mainly. I think it's more cocaine or methamphetamines. But we still don't know precisely if the violence will be reduced. Well, what will be the impact of if there are peace in Colombia and this? I don't know, because the production of cocaine has moved from Colombia to Peru and Bolivia, and I think that maybe there are some small changes in the routes on the organizations, but I think that they are very creative, and we will not see a big and structural change. Maybe some organizations are affected, maybe some routes, and maybe there is a study that says that when when where a seizure of a big seizure of cocaine in Colombia, we have increased violence in Mexico because of shortage, and people began to fight to get extra cocaine to supply. So maybe we have some kind of impact of that, but I think would be temporarily only.
Good. Let me turn to Duncan. Do we have time for another round? Do we? Thank you. Let's do one last round. The gentleman in the back, please.
Thank you. Marco Morales from the Center for U.S. Mexican Studies at UCSD. I guess my question would be a big wrap-up in the sense of you have mentioned 4 main pillars as an explanation for violence. So the question here is, these 4 explain a very specific reality in Mexico before the violence, and I'm not sure that that's what we wanted to, that's where we would want to be as a future stage. So the question is basically, what would a better Mexico look like in terms of this specific equilibrium, and how do we get there? Like which pillars should be addressed first? Should we address them at the same time? It's more of a policy question based on what you studied. Like what exactly should be the order in which we should address these particular things? And I would also be very curious about El Chapo, the true extent of the myth of El Chapo. We know after 2001 that there is this mythical, all-knowing, all-avoiding, all-encompassing figure, mostly based on journalistic reports. And I'm not so sure how much of that is actually true. So I was just wondering if you had some thoughts on what the true extent of El Chapo and his power is. Thank you.
Down front here, please.
Thanks. Chris with the Mexico Institute, Chris Wilson. So if I understand correctly, this is kind of my question, is just am I understanding correctly your story in the last 20 years? There's the context of after Kiki Camarena cutting off of the monopoly status, then an effort to restore monopoly status to the market. So that's the context as we head into the 2000s. And then there's this innovation, this market innovation that is the creation of the Zetas to increase firepower as a tactic to help restore monopoly control. As a result of that, you have a response in kind, greater firepower being developed in other groups. But you also have them looking for increased profits and therefore a move to allowing them to do more local drug dealing, extortion, kidnapping. Did the other groups respond in kind to that, or to what extent did other criminal groups feel the need to respond in kind to that market innovation? And then my other question based on that is, and to what extent, because in the same period is when we have the election of Vicente Fox, the elimination of single-party rule in Mexico, to what extent does the decentralization of power in Mexico fit into this equation of the story of the changing dynamics in the last decade in Mexico and in the levels of violence?
Those are 2 very substantial questions, Guillermo. Maybe we should stop here and let you unpack those a bit.
Yes. Well, about this policy for the future and the evolving of the, I think that if we say that the problem is the drug trafficking organizations and we want to finish them, we're wrong. So I think the objective with the policy, I don't know if it can be said publicly, but the real thing we have in face is we need to choose what kind of organized crime do we need. Obviously not that violent and powerful organized crimes, as we cannot disappear them because we are neighbors with United States, and United States people likes marijuana, and so someone will produce and sell cocaine, heroin. So, and unfortunately, we are neighbors, so we will be the producers and the sellers. So we will have drug trafficking organizations in Mexico for the next, I don't know how many decades, but we will have them. The problem is what kind of organizations, because they cannot be so violent and harmful to the society. So that's the how to define a strategy to make them weaker and to send them the message very clear that if they behave violently, they will suffer a lot of punishment from the state. I think that should be the objective of this strategy. In the general, it's easy to say it, but so how you instrument and how to define the components of that strategy is not easy. I would tell you that we have a lot of discussions on these issues, and but I think we have learned how to move in that direction to have a less powerful crime organizations, and it's a very complex strategy because it has a police component, or force component with the army, the police. It needs to have a political component, because if you don't break this political structure that protects them, they will flourish again. So and you have to make some new approach to the social prevention issue, because and believe me, I've been working the last months and on how to build a prevention model, and it's not easy because we don't still know which are the main factors. So, but we need to improve this strategy with these three components: the police, the force, the military and polisiac element, the political, the construction element, and the social prevention. And what about the Chapo? Well, that's how real is this land? It's when you write a book like this, you have a real problem with the sources of information.
No, it's true.
And you say, well, is this true or is this not true? It's just a gossip, a rumor it's an invention of a newspaper. So what I try to make to solve this problem is well, for example, with the question that was made about this how do they distributed the plazas or the well, I really don't know if there was the meeting in Acapulco, if there were 20 or 50, or it was the Aguilar, if Guillermo González Calderón, it was the chief who was controlling the meeting, or if it was Aguilar Guajardo who was the representative of Felix Gallardo. I don't know. But the real fact is that after that detention of Felix Gallardo, we have cartels in Tijuana, in Juarez, and so I don't know if there was a meeting. Everybody said that was a meeting. We don't know the details, but the real fact is that we have this fragmentation. I don't know. In some moments they have to decide it. So it's the same about the Chapo. I don't know if he's a real genius of strategic thinking, but you see, the Sinaloa cartel was disappearing in the end of the 90s, and suddenly it becomes, in 2010, is the most powerful organization. So I suppose that was, the Chapo had to be, the Chapo did something about that. So I don't know if he was alone or it was also Mayo Zambada or the two of them. But so this is the way you can speculate less and say, if you say this is the fact one and this is the fact two in a period of time, so how do I explain this? Well, leadership is one of the reasons, and I think that the Chapo, so that's why I accept that the Chapo is a good leader and a good businessman. So, okay. So this all the innovation, market innovation strategies instrumented by the CETAs. I think that let me put you this way. I wrote, I hope that today will be at Nexus on the web page, an article about this, about the consequences of the Chapo detention, and I was asking 3 models of business for the drug trafficking. The model who operated between the 50s and the 80s, the state control, the drug trafficking organizations say it's good for us to be non-violent, just to focus on the business of exporting drugs to the United States and not making crime activity against the Mexican society. So this is one model who operated 30 years. Then that tacit agreement between the organized crime and the state disappeared, and we saw this experiment to make a new agreement, but between the organizations without the state. And was the objective of the Acapulco meeting. Let's distribute the country, have several enterprises, and establish a lot of rules to how is it, convivir pacíficamente.
Get along together?
Just get along together peacefully. That was the main objective of that meeting. But the problem with these kinds of agreements without the state and the force of an external element more powerful is that the rules, what happens if I don't respect these new rules? So Chapo began to break those laws. And Chapo is, I think, the main reason a lot of these conflicts. And so we have the model, as the Chapo model is, let's fight all the rest of the organizations to make me the main and dominant enterprise, but I keep the old rule not to harm the society. That's the model of the Chapo. And now we have the Zeta model. Take no prisoners. Make a lot of money and do whatever you have to do and export drugs, increase local markets, kidnap, extortion, everything. It's. I think that I don't know, but with the detention of El Chapo, at least I think that Mario Zambada is an old guy who has lived in the three models. Maybe he's thinking, what is the result of these 12 years of fighting? It's very expensive. What is the result of all this? I don't know. If because we have if you see all the leaders of the drug trafficking cartels in 2006, and you review the list, the relationship of the leaders, most of them are dead or in jail. So we have a renewal of leadership, a new generation of leaders. And if you see them in the social networks, the sons of El Chapo, I would be aware, I would be very preoccupied, because maybe the model will be the set as one. And maybe the leaders like Mayo would say, let's try to make a new agreement, because it is not conducting to anything good, this amount of violence, because they have a state against them, against all of them. So maybe they enter in some kind of evaluation process, and let's say, okay, so I would not be surprised. I think it's not a lot of possibilities or probabilities of these things, but we can see that also this another scenario, that they would say, okay, let's calm down things.
Let me, I want to thank you very much. This, and congratulate you on your book. I think it's really very, very good contribution. And I'm hoping that there will be a book like this about the United States. Yes. Somebody would write a book like that. I'm hoping that your next projects, as you're looking down the road, that you'll give us another analysis of prevention, and also about strategies to deal with the future of these issues. I want to thank Duncan. Thank you all for coming, and again, very well done and very interesting. Thanks a lot. Thank you. You have to sign for me. Congratulations. No? It's really very good.